Today on Bench Briefs, we're looking at a significant Supreme Court of Canada decision that tackles the balance between law enforcement powers and individual rights in the digital age. On this episode, we dive into R.V. Nguyen, a 2026 case that addresses the use of electronic surveillance and wiretaps in criminal investigations, and what limits the Charter of Rights and Freedoms places on these investigative tools. Nguyen was charged with serious criminal offenses related to alleged involvement in a drug trafficking operation. The police had gathered evidence against him through electronic surveillance and wiretaps, which were authorized under Canadian law. However, Nguyen's defense challenged this evidence, arguing that the surveillance violated his charter rights, specifically his protection against unreasonable search and seizure under Section 8. The trial court admitted the evidence anyway, leading to Nguyen's conviction. The case then made its way all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, which had to decide whether the surveillance was lawful and constitutional, and if the evidence obtained should be excluded as a remedy for any breach. So, what exactly happened here? Law enforcement suspected Nguyen was involved in a drug trafficking ring. To build their case, police sought and received judicial authorization for electronic surveillance, including wiretaps. These wiretaps intercepted Nguyen's private communications, which later became key evidence at trial. Nguyen's lawyers argued that the way these surveillance measures were authorized or executed violated his charter rights. They claimed that the police overstepped legal boundaries, making the evidence inadmissible. The lower courts disagreed, finding that proper procedures were followed and that the evidence could be used. But the Supreme Court had to take a closer look at whether the police actions met both statutory requirements and charter standards. This brought the court to the heart of the legal issues. First, did the electronic surveillance and wiretap evidence violate Nguyen's Section 8 rights against unreasonable search and seizure? Section 8 protects Canadians from state intrusion into their private affairs unless such interference is reasonable and authorized by law. The court examined whether the surveillance was authorized by a valid warrant and whether that warrant was issued based on sufficient and specific grounds. Second, the court considered whether the police complied with the strict procedural safeguards designed to limit the scope and duration of electronic surveillance. Third, assuming there was a charter breach, the court had to decide whether the evidence obtained should be excluded under Section 24(2) of the Charter, which allows courts to exclude evidence if its admission would bring the administration of justice into disrepute. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled that while electronic surveillance is a powerful investigative tool, it must be carefully regulated to protect individual privacy rights. The court found that the authorization for the wiretaps in Nguyen's case met the statutory requirements and that the police adhered to the necessary procedures. The surveillance was deemed reasonable and did not violate Section 8 rights. Consequently, the evidence was properly admitted and Nguyen's conviction was upheld. The court emphasized the importance of balancing effective law enforcement with privacy protections, especially as technology evolves and surveillance capabilities become more sophisticated. Why does this case matter? R.V. Nguyen sets an important precedent for how Canadian courts will handle cases involving electronic surveillance and privacy rights going forward. It clarifies the standards for judicial authorization of wiretaps and electronic monitoring, reinforcing that such measures must be justified, narrowly tailored, and subject to oversight. The decision acknowledges the realities of modern policing, where digital evidence often plays a critical role, while reminding us that constitutional safeguards remain vital. For lawyers, law enforcement, and Canadians at large, this case is a reminder that privacy rights continue to be fiercely protected, even in the context of serious criminal investigations. Thanks for listening to Bench Briefs. Join us next time for another episode where we break down key Canadian legal decisions and what they mean for you. Until then, take care.